Greetings and welcome back to the third installment of my series, Fun with Dashcams. Today we're going to be covering actually three dashcams, which are basically the same, but you will see that there are some slight differences in the design and the chassis, and that's why I've named it a dashcam by any other name. Same dashcam, but a little different. Today we're going to be reviewing three basic models, which you're going to see the similarities, but at the same time you will see the differences, which we'll cover. The first is going to be the X3000, otherwise known as the R310. The second we'll be covering, which I'll show a picture. I don't have my camera with me. I'm letting a friend borrow it. He had an incident on the road the other day, so I'm letting him use that for the time being, which is the R310. I've got some pictures and we'll talk about that one. Maybe I'll do a video by itself later. So that's the second one. And the third one will be what's commonly known as the X6000. More familiar to any of the Russians out there that have seen this on the market. All of these have been on the market since about 2011, 2012. The earliest mention I've seen of any of these was about 2010, late 2010, early 2011. So they've been out there for a couple of years, and they'll probably be filtering out of the market, and we'll cover that. We're going to be and of course there are others that pretty much have the same guts as these, and they will probably go under different names, and there'll be different form factors. But once you see some of the similarities, and at the very end of this, I'll actually attach samples of daytime, dawn, midday, and nighttime driving of each of these different cameras, so you can see how much they are the same. When all is said and done, you'll realize the similarities. So it's just essentially the same guts, maybe a difference in the lenses, shoved into different cases and in different configurations. So, but in that we'll be covering what is the same. We'll be covering what's different, which is the unique differences per chassis. We're going to be covering the essential good points, the bad points, and as you saw, the not so ugly. We'll round up with a demonstration of the software. Okay, so the first one we were talking about is this, the X3000. The reason why I wanted to cover this is to let you know that all these go by different names. So it was originally called the R300, but it's known as a generic X3000, and it may have a bunch of different resellers but it's also known as the Protect 802 or the Brick House Dual View car camera. This is one you need to avoid. This camera I got for about 50 bucks with the GPS antenna. This Dual View is currently being sold, the Brick House, for like 100 bucks. Not worth it. So that's why I want to mention that. The next one will be the R310, which is actually this one, commonly called the Boom Yours, but just generically known as the R310. And the last one we will cover will of course be this one, the X6000, also known as the X2000, but it doesn't have the GPS, but it may go by other names as well. In particular mention is the Kim Komando. It looks like one that I believe is called the X8000, but it has the essential UI as these, and the video looks the same. And I just wanted to include this picture to show you the basic configuration. That's why I wanted to lay these out. First thing you'll notice is that these are all dual lens cameras, and all of them have a screen. So here's the front lens, and for the 610, this is actually the front lens. The rear-facing lens has 4 IR LEDs. This has 2 LEDs for the front and the back. This one has no LEDs. We'll put that to the side over here. So we got to say what's the same about all these. All these appear to have the SG chipset. You can go back and look at the first video to see the sample I had. That was actually a gutted R300 that I blew up doing a firmware upgrade when I should not have. But I cover that a little bit more in detail and how all that fit together and how that works. And you can tell mainly by the UI, which I'll go ahead and give you a sample of that. Looking here on the X3000, there is no memory card, but as soon as we plug it in, yeah, whatever. We got to get past this. Ah, come on. Well, I don't have a card. Let me put a card in here real quick. So sorry about that delay. We're going to go ahead and install a memory card real quick, because that's one thing. These guys are real finicky. Has to have a card. You can get around it. And we'll say yes. And it'll take a minute. But as soon as it's done formatting, it's going to immediately start recording. You know, it's the power on record. Okay, so you notice I have my dual lens. You can see that it's looking up towards that camera, and it's looking down towards the desktop. Stop recording, and we're going to go to menu. Come on. And I just wanted you to take a look at that menu, that UI. Of course, we can go up and down with that. I'm going to go ahead and eject that and power off. And I'm going to take the card and I'm going to put it now in here, which appears to be a completely different camera. The X6000 again has power. And you'll notice the same thing. This camera is looking up towards the recording camera. This is looking down towards the desktop. And if I stop recording and I go into menu, you're going to notice that this UI looks eerily similar. In fact, it's the same. And that's why I wanted to cover this. Anytime you see a screen in any of the reviews online, you see what you just saw between those two cameras, it more than likely means it's an SG. So there's some important things to understand about that. Number one, it is a pretty generic dash cam. Same guts, just like the 3000, just like the 6000, just like the R310. It will have the power and record. It has auto power off, and it has a built-in battery, just like you saw in the first video. They are dual lens. They are a Taxicam. So you have the option of single or dual channel recording. Typically it's one lens or the other, one camera or the other, or both at the same time. The whole reason you get one is so you can record both at the same time. Otherwise you need to get a standard single lens dash cam. And again, it's mainly to record the inside and possibly through the back. One thing you got to note is that a lot of these are marked as being, for example, here's the box of the X3000 HD DVR. Okay, HD is at a minimum 1280 by 720. This one, I don't believe it's marked. Actually, it is. Notice the same icons for everything that you see on here. Kind of makes you think that it's the same company that makes them, and actually it is. They're just rebranded 100 different ways. But the important thing to note is it's not really HD. It's by taking two 640 by 480 or standard VGA or standard definition images, kludging them together when you actually render it with the software that comes from the SD card when you format it in the cameras, and it will give you a native resolution of 1280 by 480. Otherwise, if you actually set the camera to only record that particular trip or that particular mode as 640 by 480, in other words, a single channel, not a dual channel record, then it will render it as 640 by 480 or standard definition. So that's an important thing to remember. One thing that is interesting is that the videos, when they're exported, are exported as MJPEG. They're recorded and exported as MJPEG in an AVI container with audio as pulse code modulation. Generic. Why is this important? Low power CPU, so therefore it's using a standard that's low latency. The benefit of this, the downside is these cameras are not going to be high def. The plus is that anything will play this. You don't have to have a special codec or a special player. Once you export, it can be played on anything. You will find with other dash cams you may have to use QuickTime for some. Some players are more finicky than others. Windows Media Player, even in Windows 7 and Windows 8.1. I don't know about Windows 8.1, but I know in 8.0 and 7, by default, they don't play at H.264, whereas QuickTime will, and most media players in Linux and Mac will typically play H.264. Windows Media Player, you have to load the codec. But that's what's nice about this is you can actually natively play this in Firefox. So a common cross-platform browser, common cross-platform media standards. All these cameras have a G sensor. They all have GPS. They all have a built-in screen, as you saw, but we'll cover that in a little bit. And they all have native software, and they all support encryption per se, plus password protect on the SD, which is kind of interesting. That's a unique feature of the SD chipset, which actually makes this a little bit more unique and a little bit attractive, maybe, if that's your thing. If you want to protect it so that people can't tamper with it, we'll cover that in a little bit. Okay, so a breakdown of the features. You should be able to read this. This column is going to cover the 3000. So we'll say this guy. This guy is the boom yours, for reference, of course. Try and get that all to fit. And the 6000. So that everybody sees it for reference. So for the 3000, it has, of course, two camera angles. This is, when it's looking at it, this is camera 1, this is camera 2. So front camera is 140 degrees. Back camera is with 6 positions, vertical. The back camera is a fixed position, 120 degree view angle. There are no IR LEDs. There is no IR filter on the back camera, whereas the front camera appears to handle light fine. That camera gets a little washed out, and it actually certain things come kind of a little bluish or purplish, and that's because it's missing the IR filter. And that's important because this is the same way in that it does not have an IR filter on any of the cameras because it has an IR LED. IR filters are to block out IR light so that it doesn't get oversaturation from that particular wavelength. All these CCDs in webcams, cell phone cameras, all these actually do lean into the infrared range that the CCDs are sensitive to. So they typically put in an IR filter to block that out. Our eyes actually block out infrared light, just like they block out ultraviolet. They block out infrared too. It unfortunately does cause cataracts if you spend a lot of time in the sun over your life, but it also protects the backside of your cornea. Your cornea blocks it, and the lens blocks it to protect the backside of your eye to really prevent you from going blind. Otherwise, you would end up with macular degeneration by the time you're in your 20s. because IR would just literally burn your eyeballs out. So it doesn't really hurt these, but because it will oversaturate and it will allow that color to bleed in, it really kind of screws up the image. So they'll typically put an IR filter on that front lens. Unfortunately, but the downside is you can't utilize that extra spectrum, but you may or may not need it. So in this case, for the X3000, does have one, does not have one. It allows more light in the back. Not sure why they didn't do that and did not include an IR light, but hey, whatever. Auto screen off. This supports auto screen off. Screen size, vertical, is 2.7. Makes it very nice for playback. And power is mini USB, of course, like you saw. I can use a standard mini USB, have it plugged in a computer, plug it in, and it goes. Okay, so the R310, this guy, the front lens is actually this lens right here, and the giveaway is it has IR lights here. So the front lens is 140 degrees view angle, and it rotates 270 degrees. So depending on how you have the camera oriented, you can rotate it this way or that way, but it has a full range of motion of 270 degrees on both of them. So 140 degrees for lens number 1, 120 degree view angle lens number 2. It has IR LEDs to illuminate the inside of the car, very important for nighttime. Auto screen off, of course. The screen is 2.7, same size as this one. And it's powered through a barrel connector, and I don't have a sample of that, but it just, it's a normal, like a normal wall wart or something. But it's not mini USB, which is kind of a downer, but it doesn't really matter that much. And so the X6000, this guy, he's got for lens number 1, camera number 1, he's fixed with a 100 degree view angle, because he's mainly more interested in trying to home in through the back, not trying to capture everything, but trying to look more through the back window. Whereas this guy is more likely to capture all the stuff that's going on inside the car because of his nice wide view angle. Same with the boom yours. You can't really see through the back window that much. So what they've done is they've restricted the view angle on this camera so that it will still record some of what's going on inside, but it's trying to limit it more to be able to look out of the back windscreen to kind of function a little like a rear view camera, without actually mounting a camera on the back. So the benefit is it's a single unit all in one, but there's limitations as to what you can actually see all the way through the car. It's not a zoom lens, it's just it's the same aperture as these, as on the boom yours, just restricted a little bit more on the view angle. Okay. Front lens, or camera number 2, is adjustable to 270 degrees, so you can have it facing all the way through or all the way to the front. This is actual proper orientation if the screen was facing you. Let me try that again. And the camera was facing forward. So you've got 270 degrees of motion, just like the boom yours, or just like the R310, excuse me. I call it the boom yours because that's who I bought it from. IR LED, of course. He's got IR LED on both the front and back. This is kind of useless. This is good for illuminating at night the inside of the cab. This is completely useless because this will just shine off of the front windshield and actually cause glare because, again, there is no IR filter, so the camera will pick it up, and it just creates distortion in the screen. Auto screen off. This is what's kind of weird is this guy does not. You actually have to manually push it to the right to deactivate the screen. He does not have an actual screen off feature. What he has is he has a feature in the menu that actually says LED control, whereas he will have LCD control, he's LED control, but it doesn't do anything. The screen still doesn't automatically turn off. I don't know if that's just a mistype or what, but this kind of camera is a little wonked. And of course he's got mini USB power, so mini USB power. As you can see, one thing that's nice about these is because they activate so quickly and immediately start recording, that means as soon as the car's turned on, they're ready to go. So that is kind of a nice feature of, even though they're kind of cheaper and lower resolution, that's what's nice. So this is pretty much all of what's different between them. So talking about the good, what is good about this? Well, the fact that we have multiple mounting options. So take that away. This is for the X3000. He's got a nice little cradle that this guy can fit into. Let me close that. And he literally just slides in, snaps in. But you can also turn it the other way, so he can either be mounted with the windscreen or mount him to the dash. And you've seen those, the previous video covers that. So he can go both ways. What's also interesting is that it's a standard 1/4 inch camera mount. So you actually have 3 different ways in which you can mount them. You can mount them dash, windscreen, or use another mount like for a use another mount like for a standard camcorder. So you could even put them on a tripod if you really wanted to. With the 6000, well, actually let's start with the boom yours. He's kind of the same way, and this mount is kind of interesting because it's got 2 ball joints here, and there's actually one behind the camera they're basically ball joints, and so you can reposition this thing 100 different ways. This is probably the most flexible in the mounting options and in how you can adjust the lenses and how they face. What's also interesting is if you notice right here, just like you had on the 3000, he also utilizes a 1/4 inch. So you actually have some optional third-party mounts that you might be able to get for this guy. X6000, of course, he's the odd one of the bunch. He uses what was oftentimes a more standard kind of clip in the way he attaches, and the mount actually has a ball joint. So he could, in theory, you could mount him up on the windscreen, you could turn it around, mount it on the dash. It's probably more intended to be, it kind of is intended to be mounted either or. That's also what's nice about having the 270 degrees of motion here on the front, on the camera number 2, is so that you can attach him however you want, mount him, mount him from the side, however. But the ball joint does give you a little bit of flexibility. The downside of this particular camera, this particular mount, and this is not indicative of this type of mount, it's just for this camera, has a tendency to wobble. I wasn't a real big fan of this camera. This was my first one I bought, and I was really interested to see it, but I kept getting this weird sound anomaly, and it took me a while to figure out it's because the thing is so loose. And it's been that way since I bought it. So maybe put some Loctite in there, and just make it permanent. That it would probably be a serviceable camera. But with the current mount as it is and the condition it's in, not so much. So, as you saw, you have many options as to where you can mount these things. And each one of them has the ability to mount, like I showed, to the dash or to the windscreen. And 2 of them have the 1/4 inch. One thing nice is you can actually, because this supports a pretty standard mount, there's an option to get get on eBay or Amazon and get some of the more standard clip mounts like you have here, and just so you can view that. You might be able to get a different one and maybe it'll fit better, but you have that option. The good, of course, is the quote-unquote 360 degrees is because you've got what's going on in front and what's going on behind. You actually can kind of see, depending upon how you position it, because of those view angles. Remember, it kind of gives you that fisheye effect of, that view angle, being able to view kind of in a cone, more or less. You might be able to catch what's going on not just in the front, but also from the back, maybe even through the side windows and even through the back windshield, the back window. Recording is okay during the day. I would call it average. They all have GPS, but not every one is built. It will function the same. And just to show you, they all utilize a GPS antenna with a 4-way plug. His 4-way plug's right there. And you've already seen his 4-way plug. The boom viewer is a little bit different in that it uses a form of a 4-pin mini USB, so it's not like a normal mini USB. It's a little bit different. So, but what's nice about the little boom viewers is he's actually got a GPS antenna that mounts to the thing. So he's kind of more of an all-in-one kind of unit. You don't have to take this extra cable and snake it away somewhere and hide it up on the windscreen or something. So I've come to really like this one the best of all these, just because of the overall configuration. IRDs for low or no light inside the vehicle, very important for nighttime. Like I said, if you're trying to capture what's going inside the car 24 hours a day, having those IRs to be able to illuminate is very good. Built-in screen, you can play back on the spot. You have an accident, you come to a near miss, or you just see something silly, and you want to play that back to show somebody. It's one thing to say, man, you'll never believe what I just saw. Well, now you can show them. So that's a real added feature of this, and because the screen's almost 3 inches, it actually, you can see it. And what's nice is when you do the playback on the camera itself on these, you can actually select one channel or the other, even though it may be recording both. During playback, you can select it to show just what was being recorded in camera 1 or camera 2, or both. Software is actually dumped onto the SD card. Like you saw when I first powered on the X3000, it asked if I wanted to format the card. I said yes. As soon as it does that, it formats the card out. It actually installs a piece of software on there, so you don't have to have an extra disk. It's just automatically loaded onto that SD card and will be available anytime you plug that SD card into a Windows machine. Exported files can be played back in almost any media player, going back to MJPEG and PCM for audio. Encryption is kind of an interesting thing. It uses, when it formats that card, it creates a protected volume. Only a couple, I think about 100, 200 megs, 150, 200 megs of an SD card will actually be viewable from a Windows machine. Then you tell it, yes, I want to fire up the player, and then the player actually loads a special driver which then accesses this protected volume. And then what you can do is you can set a password for the player in order to password protect the quote-unquote encrypted proprietary volume, which makes it a true black box. So not only do you have to have that player in order to even access it, which is part of the overall bundle, but then you can also password protect it so that other people can't come behind you and edit, delete, do something to change that record. So that's what's kind of cool about that. It doesn't affect the fact that the camera will record it. Like I said, it's driven by the SG chipset. So each one of these will still record to that protected volume. It's just that when you plug it into a Windows machine, the player won't be able to access it unless you put in that password. So that's kind of interesting. Now the downside is you got to remember that password. Otherwise you'll never be able to play it again. So let's talk about the bad. Like I said before, these are not high-def cameras. They're pretty much 640 by 640 kludged together to give you a pseudo HD. But if it works, it works. What's passable? But most people are probably not going to be happy if you're just using this or this purely as a forward-facing camera. You're more than likely not going to be happy with it. It will do the job, but then again, like I said, it's not HD. Very poor nighttime performance, but that you're going to find in a lot of dash cams. If you don't have WDR or you don't have probably a $200 and up camera with good optics, you're really not going to get very good night performance. Even my 0801, which I'll review in the future, doesn't really do that good at night. It does better than these guys, of course. It gives you a clearer picture, but low light or no light performance, not so much. Okay, yeah, this is a big one. In some of your more expensive cameras, your power and your USB, or your power and data, will be shared. The problem here is that I have this camera plugged into the computer right now, and it's getting power from the USB, but it cannot read anything. In order for me to pull anything off this camera, or off the boom yours, I have to extract the card, and I have to get an SD reader, and then I can read it in the computer. Some of the nicer dash cams, and even some of the cheaper ones, will have the ability to read USB data natively off the camera. It supports the USB data mode, and it'll just appear as if you were plugging in a thumb drive or some other storage device. It would just come up and show you the contents of the SD card. So that's the one thing that sucks about this, and it's all of them, the 3000, the 6000, and the boom yours, is the power is on the USB is only power. So GPS is a little wonky on this guy. For the most part, he works. He kind of gets a little confused sometimes. I might end up appearing on the feeder road for a while in Texas. That access road along the highways, as we call them, feeder roads, that run parallel to the highway. This guy, I think he worked for a grand total of like 2 weeks, and then he just stopped working at all. So the GPS for him doesn't even work anymore. It's no point. He's worked fairly consistently. The boom yours, I don't think I've ever really seen it fail. The downside of these guys is if you haven't had them plugged in for a while, they will need a couple minutes to actually figure out where they are and to start properly recording GPS. You also need to have a fairly clear day. If it's very cloudy or fairly stormy, they're not really going to pick up a GPS signal. So they need a fairly good signal integrity in order to, in other words, very, very low loss LOS in order to function properly. I think he's more sensitive than him. The boom yours, I think is the least sensitive, even though it has the smallest GPS antenna. But like I said, he's just pretty much garbage. He could never really find himself after about the second week. He just got stuck and kept showing me as sitting in the same place. He'd get confused every once in a while. Boom yours never really had too much of a problem except in really, really bad weather. He would lose a signal. That's why I say he's a little wonked here. 6000, garbage. No LED in the cab. That's a gripe I have about this guy, because I like the configuration. It's nice. It's simple. It's very well built. Very solid case. I like the fact. I think it's a neat gimmick that they've incorporated the interior lens into the keypad. That's pretty slick. I mean, just overall, it's a very sleek, nice little design. This guy is more of a gimmick, but with this little joystick controller here, he's cheap. He feels cheap. I mean, the case is okay, but he just feels cheap. The 8000, the R310 seems to be okay. He's kind of somewhere in the middle, whereas this guy's really solid, and trust me, it took me a while to take the other one apart. This guy is, I'm afraid to handle him sometimes. But the fact that he has an LED, that's what kind of puts him ahead of this guy, is because nighttime illumination, being able to see what's going on in the car, it's very important. But the boom yours actually has it too. In fact, he has 4 versus this guy's 2, so the R310 gives you more illumination inside the car. It's not like lighting it up like a floodlight, but it does provide light inside the car so that you can at least see what's going on in no light conditions. So it's kind of nice. Software is not compatible with Mac OS. These guys actually will say, I don't know if you can read that, but it'll say it's compatible with Mac OS 10.3 and above, and they all say that. That's a bunch of horse crap. They are not compatible with Macs. You will never see anything pop up on a Mac. You must use a Windows machine. If you do get it to work with a Mac, then you're the first I've known, but I've never seen these things work on a Mac. So that's one thing. That's one of the caveats to remember is the software on there, it works in Windows. Now, once you run it in Windows and you export the videos, you can then play them off somewhere else. Oh yeah, that's one thing I forgot to mention. Well, I'll cover that in a little bit, actually. So what's the not so ugly? They're cheap. $50 to $70. He actually, I bought him was $80, and I think I got ripped off. But I had to order them from overseas. I couldn't, and I did it air freight to expedite it because I didn't want to have to wait 6 weeks for him to get there. I had to order them from Russia. Apparently they're popular over there. I don't know. But this guy was, he comes in 2 flavors. I've seen him sold with the GPS antenna and without. Without the GPS antenna, he's usually a couple bucks cheaper, but it's like $4 or $5. I went ahead and bought him for about like $51, $52. The R310 I had originally bought for like $47, but as I said, he turned out to be kind of a lemon. The boom yours cost me, and this was back about 6 months ago when I bought them, about $65. It was $70 with shipping. It took a while, and he didn't show up in a box. Okay, he showed up in bubble wrap in an envelope, because they do that. They'll unpack the contents of a box, and they'll just put them in a bulk carrier, and they'll package them up in bubble wrap in a bag to protect them, and that way they can put more in a shipping container and save on freight costs. And the boom yours also, he wasn't shipped from here in the U.S. He had to get shipped from overseas, so I had to wait for a little while for him to get here. But I also paid overnight freight. So they're all fairly cheap. And really in the 50 to 70 range, you don't want to pay more. That's all you want to pay. Provides a view of the front, the inside, maybe even the sides, and through the back, depending, again, depending upon the view angle of the optics, lighting conditions, and the configuration of your car. If you're in a truck, that back window is closer to the camera, so you're more likely to see through the back, whereas if you're driving a van or a large car or even a small car, you got a larger cabin. So how far back is your cabin? Where do you position the camera? The more forward you position the camera, that view angle moves with it, and so you're more likely to see the sides of the car, and it'll make more of a fisheye effect, when you're viewing. So depending on that angle, that causes more of a distortion in the field of view. But it also provides you a wider angle of view. You get to see more, and therefore you record more. So that's where this, depending on where you place it, how big your vehicle is, I can show you in the sample videos at the end of this. You'll see differences in the cameras about what they can see. This guy sees the least, so he's pretty much looking through the back window for the most part. This guy actually captures the most, so you can't see much of anything out of the back window of my car, but you definitely can actually see through the side window, so that's kind of interesting. And the boom yours is kind of somewhere in between. Now that we've got our video, how do we get it off the SD? And these all come with one or the other version of this. They call it either X player or J player. And that's an example of it. If you've ever seen any videos online where you're looking at a little player like that, I know it's kind of crappy, but it's, camera 1, camera 2, the tracks, Google Maps, and individual tracks within a trip. So all of these are a single recording of a trip. And there's 2 ways you can use this to playback and pull it. You can play back both channels, one or the other. It gives you Google Maps, like I said, and it also gives you G-sensor data underneath the video player. It is designed to be a black box. So like we saw before, we were talking about password protection, and with a proprietary partition, resist tampering of the recording. So if you use a camera like this and you enable password protection, only you can access it. So only you will be able to manipulate it. No one else will be able to come behind you and even read it and look at it, let alone start deleting tracks from it, start deleting your trips, or deleting individual videos from a trip. And hence, that's why I say it's designed to be a black box. You can, and this is a neat little thing, is you know, with the player, you can export individual files or an entire trip. So from the time the power starts to the time the power shuts off, that's an entire trip. And then about every 1.5 minutes, you have an individual video file being recorded. So it stitches all those together, and you can either export it as individual files, or you can merge them all together and make a single continuous file and export that entire file with its, you know, so the audio and video. And you can do the same thing with the GPS tracks, which is nice. It actually exports them as KML files, so you can then take that KML file and dump it into Google Earth and be able to play back with it, play back on it, so you can reconstruct your trip. Just like, you know, when you can't really see it. And I'll show you an example of that in the player, an actual player view at the end of this to give you a sample. But in addition to playing the video, it's going to play back your track right here on the Google Maps, and it's going to follow as it goes through the trip and which tracks are being played. And that pretty much concludes the live demo portion of this. I'm going to follow up with some samples of video that each of the cameras have captured. So I'm going to use the X3000 as an example of an SG-based camera, of an SG-based Taxicam, to give you a rundown of the UI, both in its operational mode and its setup mode. As an aside, I wanted to mention power. So this guy has a mini USB, and I have here a mini USB to standard USB-A cable. With a 12-volt accessory adapter to USB, I can then utilize that to actually power the camera. So I don't need the proper wall wart type plug. I can just go ahead and cobble together a cable like this, which means I can get a USB extender such as this, and then run it to that little adapter there, and I can relocate that wherever I want within the vehicle. So that's just an aside to give you a little clue about power with these things. That's why it's preferable to have a universal adapter or a universal plug like that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and power this guy up with the power button right here, and we'll be greeted immediately by the record on power. And you'll notice right here up at the top, let me see if I can get the glare, it shows we're recording. We've got two different views, the front lens and the back lens, or camera 1 and camera 2. And we also have this weird little thing here that looks like a globe with a box in it and an exclamation point. That is actually the GPS receiver, the GPS feature, saying it cannot get a signal, or at least cannot verify a signal from the antenna. There's not really much you can do about that. It'll eventually clear out, or it will turn itself off. Here we have power indicator showing that the battery is currently fully charged. It gives you a couple minutes, but don't rely on this battery to last too long. And here we've got this little dual window, which means it's actually in a dual record mode, so it's recording one or the other. And if we can get clever here, we might actually be able to, well, there we go. So this when it's in the record mode, left arrow is going to turn audio record on or off, so it'll turn the microphone on and off. And the right button will actually tell it to lock a file, so you don't have the normal little panic button. So let's go ahead and get out of that. So going into menu, first and foremost, we see we have an option for record mode. And if we go into record mode, we have an option of channel 1 and channel 2, channel 1 the front camera only, or channel 2 only. And we'll leave it there. We of course have the time set up. This time is a little off, but it follows European method, month before date, and it's kind of weird, but all the dash cams will typically have this, and this is pretty universal with all the SG based chips. And the time, you use the arrow left, right, or up, down, depending upon your camera model to then set that and hit the OK to set it. So format does just that. It will format the card. When it formats the card, it will actually load a proprietary partition on there, or kind of a hidden file that only the reader, the player, can access, and it will also load a player software. This particular camera will install the X2 player. So you may also have them that install the J player. Same UI, it's just the J player is a little bit more updated. I think it works a little bit better, but it'll play all the same files. You can actually install it onto your desktop of your machine. TV out, even though it's there, it's kind of useless. It's mainly just saying North American standard versus European, but even this, North America is now on ATSC, Europe is now, and Asia is now on DVB, so with the exception of North America, US, Canada, maybe Mexico in most parts, and parts of Japan and Korea, no one really uses NTSC. So beep is just that. It's just kind of useless, gets annoying. Audio record, you know, as you saw us in the operational mode, we can turn the microphone on or off. Language setting, just that. You have different languages: English, Chinese simplified, Chinese traditional, Big Five Chinese, Korean, Russian, German, and it'll have French and Spanish, some of these models, but this is all this will support. LCD default is actually your auto screen off. Leaving it on will leave the screen on all the time. Auto off, it counts down about 15 to 20 seconds after the camera activates with power and records, and then it will just turn the monitor off. G sensor, as we said previously, a shock sensor. The gravimetric sensor has different levels of sensitivity. Extremely low, it'll start locking every file with every bump you hit. Normal, there's really no way of gauging it. I just typically leave it disabled because it's annoying. Frequency, this would be beneficial when you are using this camera near certain types of lights, especially fluorescing lights, maybe certain halogens, any kind of high frequency that uses a ballast. European standard and world standard 50 hertz, US standard, North American standard 60 hertz. It's best in North America, leave it on 60. Otherwise, you'll have this weird artifacting of bands going up and down the screen because it's recording at recording is out of phase with how the light is, cycling with the ballast. So default setting, just that, it returns to factory, and that pretty much ends everything on the UI. And we'll just go ahead and turn that off. Alright, we're going to cover real quick the setup in the car. I just did a quick demonstration drive a little while ago, and then we're going to follow on with actual evaluation of the software itself and show you some of the features of that software. So first things first, I took a few pictures while it was in the car, and like we discussed in our review of the UI, this is it in operational mode. You saw the record is currently being charged and is currently viewing in 2 panes, camera 1, camera 2. That's me taking the picture. You notice here that GPS is active. It actually says GPS. This means it's found the signal and it's synced up with the GPS module, the antenna, and so it's actively logging GPS. Because it's logging GPS, we also have a speed indicator. Unfortunately, this cannot be changed. This is automatic, and you'll see this when you look at the R310. That comes up pretty quick. Any of these others that are based on it before about 2012 will actually have a speed indicator in kilometers an hour. And of course, date, time. And under here, this is what's actually going to be in your record pane, is 2 views plus date timestamp on both panes. Just another view. This is an example of how it's mounted. Here's my rearview mirror, and it's mounted up here in the shaded area on the windscreen. This is a common complaint that a lot of people have, because here's the GPS antenna dongle, here is power, and right here is SD card. So to try to manipulate the card, I mean, this is 3 axes, so 3 degrees of motion, 3 degrees of movement mount, and it's for the most part stable. you really don't want to be monkeying around with this too much. Once you set it, you want to crank it down and keep it as solid and stable as possible so that it keeps the view where you set it. The GPS actually has a little lock. I found that if you shave off the lock with a pair of snips, a pair of cross cutters, you can still take that four-way in and out, but you don't really have to in order to extract the card. Since this does not have a USB data capability, you're going to want to unplug the USB mini power port and then extract the card that way. Otherwise you have to use a pair of tweezers, but that's really the only way to do it. So I just wanted to show you this. This is with any of these cameras, with that four-way and that power always being so close together. That's why the R6000 kind of interested me, because it spaced it out. Now on the R310, you know, all its connectors up here at the top, and it has power one side, then the card, and then it's a little proprietary mini USB-A, I believe is what it is, for its GPS. So it's a little bit different than this connector. It allows you to be able to pull the card out from the top relatively easily. But like I said, this is the 3000, like we've been using as the example. Just another view to show you, you know, the cables can be hidden, but you're going to have some cables sticking out of the side. And these, I wrapped them around the back of the mirror and ran them up. This was just temporary. Alright, so now to look at the software. Have here a SD card adapter, and a USB to SD reader. And when we plug it in, it's going to read it as another USB device, a USB data device. So I'm just going to cancel that out, just so you can show you, you know, now we have this thing called DR disk. We will go ahead and get into that. Sorry that the screen's flickering on and off. This is an old HDMI TV. Okay, first and foremost, it defaults, you notice here, to Chinese. Well, you may or may not, but this is a Chinese version of Google. It's not really Google, it's Chinese maps developed by some company. Oh, I take that back. No, that it is actually Google. So this automatically defaults to Shenzhen, China, where the camera was built. Come down here to the folder. This is going to actually let us access, and I did this on purpose to show you this feature. I set a password for this. So let's say I just do a false password. It tells me wrong password, so I can't get into the card, and I won't be able to read any of the files. So make sure you remember what card that is. Now, putting in the right password, you notice that the view in the back disappeared. The camera, I mean the software, the X2 player, has now read that hidden volume where it stores all of the JPEG files, and now I can access it. And you'll notice right here, just a quick rundown, we can do a snapshot. Let's say we want to do a left view, do a snapshot of it, and we can save that snapshot, or we can get a snapshot, basically a bit capture of what we're currently looking at here. We have here to actually extract. This is to export a certain video file, and we'll cover that in a minute. This is to delete a file, and these are the settings. So we can format the card, we can upload the firmware. Don't do that unless you absolutely feel like you have to. We can select between Chinese maps or Google Maps. Speed tester, just test if the card is fast enough. Here, once you have the old password, you can reset it. Hit the setting to card. That will then update the password to whatever you want. Current time zone, I know it says plus 250 hours. There's no real way to change that. And you have your basic language settings. So we have Turkish, Spanish. So we have a few more settings here than on the camera itself for languages. And that's just going to change the language in the UI for the software. That's all that does. Hit apply. That applies all the changes. We'll get out of that. Here are our basic play controls: stop, play, and pause, previous track, next track, and volume. The volume, we're going to go ahead and allow it to play. Typically I would mute it. Over here we have some more advanced features. We have where we can repeat a track just over and over, loop play. We can flip the screen if you're needing to view that. Say you mounted the camera upside down, You can then flip the view so you can properly watch it and then export it like that. Whatever you see in here is what's going to be exported using that save button. So it's not quite as intuitive as you'd probably like. You can come down here, and here it says map. It literally just turns that map feature on and off. G-sensor data just disables the viewing of G-sensor data, and you'll see that right here. Fix a video, in case you have a broken video file, and it'll show up as a little red icon. You can then set that for repair, and it'll do its best to try to extract it. We can use here to unlock a video. So if we had the gravimetric sensor turned on, we hit a bump and it locked that file, and it's just a junk file, we can unlock it, and then we can go ahead and use the delete to get rid of it. Another nice little feature here is you can make the display a little bit larger. Now looking at more of a macro layer of the video, I'm going to come down here and select this track. Well, actually, we'll set that track. So this is actually our trip. In this case, we drove for 15 minutes, 21 seconds, total size of about a gig on the SD card. I'm using a 4 gig SD card, and it gives us a start time and, like I said, total duration of that trip. And that's how it records it. And you'll see here like G1-1. So each one of these, the G1 is going to correspond to the one there, 2 is going to correspond to the 2. Like here, this is a G2-2, so total trip for 15 minutes, 21 seconds are going to be all of these videos here, G1-1, and these are all broken down in, like I said, roughly a minute and a half segments. You can do the math, but it breaks it down to roughly a minute and a half. All these cameras, based on the SG, do that. Now, I wanted to go ahead and do this to show you GPS wasn't quite synced at this point. In fact, you'll notice up here we have a GPS, we have a speed indicator, and a direction indicator. We can set that between miles per hour and kilometers per hour. I'm going to leave it on miles per hour. And here in a little bit, GPS will start to pick up. And you're actually going to see it start to track. Okay, there, we just picked it up. It probably was near the end of this, beginning of that. So you can notice here that we're driving along the highway. You can see my front view, you can see my back view, and you can see me tracking. It's currently calculating about 60 miles an hour, 59.8, 59.9. That clattering you hear is actually not clattering. That is actually the rain coming down. We had some freezing rain this morning, a little bit of freezing rain, some hard rain, and if the video plays a little bit more, you're going to hear that come in. And we have an approximation of our GPS coordinates, west by north. And this is showing you the GPS track is active. It picked up one. We're currently traveling at about west by northwest. And you can see us, like I said, as you say, following the map. We're tracking along this highway. So there, you heard the rain picking up and you hear that clattering. So it tells you that the microphone is kind of crappy, but it's fairly sensitive. So it picks up, maybe it picks up what's going on outside of the car as well, but it definitely picks up what's going on inside the car. So up here, these are our two play views. So currently we have it set for dual channel. We can then just single out look at what's left versus what's right. If this was recorded as a single channel, these would be grayed out. We would only have whatever channel was actively recorded at the time. In this case, we're going to do it, let's just look at what's front. Double click, it'll actually bring you into full screen. And you can kind of see here a little bit of artifacting, but you can see that you've got a view of the road. I pretty much have most of the front view of the car. The camera's not quite centered, so it kind of leans over here to there, a little bit more to the right than the left. But I can still see that I can still see the lanes of travel, the lines that demark the lane. I can still see cars. I can read signs. And if we want, I can also look on the inside. And this is what I was talking about, 4 reasons why you might want to have an interior camera. Can't really see it at the back so much. Like I said, it's being pretty washed out because of the lighting. You can see a little bit of artifacting because these are cheap CCDs. So they're doing the best they can, but it's recording at a pretty fluid motion. It is recording at 40 frames per second, just at a slightly lower bit rate, a slightly lower resolution, and it's doing a little bit of interpolation. Of course, this is blown up to fill the screen, which is about 4 times bigger than the native resolution of the video. So that's just something you've got to consider when you're doing the playback and when you're using these cameras. But this is why I want to talk about, depending upon the point of view of that camera, the view angle. The wider the view angle, the more it's going to capture. So with a narrower view angle, it's going to chop off here, and it's going to put more of the focus and more of the zoom, I guess you could say, towards the back, going through the back window. You might find that feature a little bit more useful, but a Taxicam primarily, like I said, is designed for recording what's in front and what's behind. And we can then select different videos within that track, like I said, each one of these, and our map will roll to the appropriate GPS track. Let's say now we want to do an export, so I want to go ahead and export this entire trip. We say save, and I'm going to go ahead and save it on the desktop. And what it's going to do, it's now going to export and build a video file over here in MJPEG format, MJPEG, Motion JPEG, in the AVI container, which, as I previously discussed, pretty much anything can read. You can drop that into Google Chrome, you can drop that into Firefox. They have built-in media players, and they will play it. They all have the codec built into them, and they should recognize, easily recognize AVI. I don't think I have Google on here, so I don't have it. But if I did, I could just drop that right in and it would play it. So it's going to go through and it's going to extract that. And once it's done, this is a slower computer. This is running an old Celeron 3 gigahertz, so it's going to take it a minute. Of course, with a faster machine, it's going to go a lot faster. And like we discussed, even though these are called quote-unquote HD cameras, anything based on this old SG chipset, it's 480, 480 by 640, 640. That's going to give you 1280, so it's almost HD, except we are 480 on the vertical axis. So it's not quite. And they don't make any illusions about it. It would be nice if they didn't put that down. So like I said, on a faster computer, this is a worst case scenario. Faster computer, it would definitely extract and render our final trip video. And like I said, we're pulling out about a gig worth. So 15 minutes of video, a gig. This is a 4 gig card. So we get about 45 minutes or so, not quite an hour, on a 4 gig card. All these cameras that support the old SGTech chipset will utilize up to a 32 gig. So you do the math. We can get several hours of video, probably more than you possibly need. But the fact that we can get quite a few hours of video, that's why one of these cameras, even at a lower bit rate, a lower resolution, might be worth it, because we're getting the view of all of what's going on inside, outside, to the sides, front, maybe even a little bit in the back, with a G sensor, and we have a GPS plot. And this is what's also nice. I mentioned this before about extraction. So we're done rendering the file. I want to go ahead and select that track again. And this little looks like a little globe. It actually looks like the Google Earth app icon. And it gives you a little floating dialog of KML. It'll then actually extract it. I want to extract, and it'll oh, where'd it go? Let's try this again. It might not be doing that because it's not picking up the We'll try a different one. This one definitely has GPS. This is trip number 2. And I vaguely remember, I think it's actually saving it in a different location. Oh, okay. Well, that's what it did. So these are our two, I'm going to go and move them to the desktop. And then look at the desktop. And then you can see that here's our video file, and this is our KML. This is our Google Earth file, and you can convert this into different things. It's not natively readable. But if you notice the name, it starts with the date and the timestamp where the video starts. You know, 10:14 and 37 seconds, 10:14 and 37 seconds. And so that's how you can see that this video goes with that GPS log. And what you can do is you can actually use the J player or the X2 player after you've extracted these. You can save them on your computer. You can then take that. I'll go ahead and close it out. Whoops. I can copy that X2 player, and let's say I want to set up a folder. Put it down in there, move my tracks in there. We don't need that one. And then I'll have to change the path. Now, because we're not reading natively from the SD card anymore, now we're just reading from that folder that we had just created on the desktop. I can then turn on my map and once the GPS data has kicked in, you'll notice that now we're tracking again. So what I have in essence is I have a true black box. I can extract my GPS log and my video, and it's now recreating my trip both from my views just like we saw before. Put that back to miles per hour. It's tracking my speed, tracking my location from that log file, and you know, so it looks different. We just rendered all of those individual files into one big giant file, and given it the GPS log. And so now we're recreating the trip, and here it shows I'm going north. I'm driving approximately 40 miles an hour, 40-41. And just like you saw all the features before, and what's kind of interesting, this even you notice it actually also encodes the G-sensor data, and that's saved in the video file itself. It's not saved in the KML, it's saved in the video file. So it's in essence recreating that. So we can now what this gives us the ability to do is keep that SD card. You know, see, here's the SD card. I can keep that for insurance purposes, put that in a safe somewhere. I can extract the videos. I can send this to the client. Unfortunately, there's no way to integrate GPS track with the video stream. This camera does not support an overlay, and this player does not support an overlay. So it's not going to render any of my GPS or speed information into the cameras. You still have to use the player to extract it, but at least you have the ability to do that. So I hope this is helpful, and I hope you enjoy the review of all these different cameras, of the review of the player, the review of the OI. I'm going to follow it up. I'm going to attach some appendix files, not to this main file, to show you the different models that I covered: the X3000, the R310, and the X6000. And I'll leave that in a playlist for this video.